Commander Sarah Chen stared at the holographic display floating before her, the blue light casting eerie shadows across her weathered face. 20 years of deep space exploration had taught her to read stellar maps like poetry, but what she saw now defied every law of physics she knew. The readings were impossible, yet undeniably real. "Captain, you need to see this," whispered Dr. Marcus Webb, his voice trembling as he manipulated the three-dimensional star chart. The elderly astrophysicist had served on 12 different exploration vessels, but Sarah had never seen him this shaken. His hands moved across the holographic interface with practiced precision, highlighting sectors of space that pulsed with an ominous red glow. The bridge of the UES Prometheus fell silent, except for the gentle hum of life support systems. Sarah's crew of 47 specialists represented humanity's finest minds, handpicked for this deep space reconnaissance mission beyond the Andromeda Gateway. They had been mapping uncharted regions for 18 months, documenting new worlds and cataloging potential threats to human colonies. Nothing had prepared them for this discovery. "Show me everything," Sarah commanded, her voice steady despite the growing unease in her chest. The main display flickered to life, revealing a sector of space that should have been empty according to all previous surveys. Instead, it showed something that made her blood run cold. Stars were dying. Not the natural death of stellar collapse or supernova explosion, but something far more sinister. Entire solar systems were simply vanishing from existence, leaving behind voids of absolute darkness. The phenomenon was spreading like a cosmic plague, consuming everything in its path with terrifying efficiency. Dr. Webb's fingers danced across the controls, overlaying temporal data onto the display. It started 3 months ago in the outer rim of the Vega cluster. At first we thought it was sensor malfunction or gravitational anomalies, but the pattern is consistent across 17 different star systems. Something is systematically erasing matter from existence. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez, the ship's tactical officer, leaned forward in her chair. Could it be a weapon? Some kind of advanced alien technology? Her dark eyes reflected the concern that was spreading through the bridge crew like wildfire. "No weapon we know of could accomplish this," Dr. Webb replied, pulling up detailed spectral analyses. "The energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. Whatever is causing this operates on principles that transcend our understanding of physics. It's not destroying matter, it's simply making it cease to exist." Sarah felt the weight of command pressing down on her shoulders. The Prometheus was humanity's most advanced exploration vessel, equipped with experimental jump drives and quantum sensors that had pushed the boundaries of human space travel. But facing the unknown had always been humanity's specialty, even when the odds seemed impossible. "How fast is it spreading?" she asked, though part of her dreaded the answer. Dr. Webb manipulated the timeline, showing the progression of the phenomenon across different star systems. The pattern became clear immediately. At current rates, it will reach the edges of human space in approximately 8 months. If it continues unchecked, every human colony, every world we've ever known will be consumed. The implications hit the bridge crew like a physical blow. Earth, Mars, the bustling colonies of Alpha Centauri, the mining stations orbiting Jupiter's moons, the research outposts scattered across a dozen star systems. All of it would simply vanish as if it had never existed. "Sir," Communications Officer Kim Park spoke up from her station, her usually calm voice tight with tension. "I'm receiving fragmentary transmissions from the affected regions. Before each system goes dark, there are reports of massive gravitational distortions and temporal anomalies. Some ships report seeing structures, artificial constructs of enormous size just before losing contact." Sarah's mind raced through the possibilities. Humanity had encountered alien life before, but nothing on this scale. The galaxy was vast and largely unexplored, containing civilizations that had mastered technologies beyond human comprehension. But this felt different, more fundamental, as if the very fabric of reality was being rewritten. "What about other spacefaring civilizations?" she asked. "The Altarian Federation, the Centauri Alliance, the independent colonies? Are they aware of this threat?" Lieutenant Park's hands flew over her communication console, scanning through subspace frequencies. "I'm detecting emergency transmissions from multiple sources. The Altarians are mobilizing their entire fleet, but their technology is centuries behind ours. The Centauri Alliance has gone silent. Their home system was one of the first affected." The bridge fell quiet again as the magnitude of the situation sank in. This wasn't just a threat to humanity. It was a threat to all existence in their region of the galaxy. Every civilization, every form of life, every trace of consciousness and creativity built up over millions of years was in danger of being erased. Dr. Webb broke the silence with a revelation that sent chills through everyone present. "Captain, I've been analyzing the progression pattern and I've discovered something significant. The phenomenon isn't random. It's following specific gravitational corridors and subspace channels. Someone or something is directing it, guiding its path through space with purpose and intelligence." Sarah stood up slowly, her mind already forming plans and contingencies. Humanity had faced extinction before, wars, plagues, environmental disasters that threatened to end their species. But each time, they had found a way to survive, to adapt, to fight back against impossible odds. It was what made them uniquely human. "Signal Earth Command immediately," she ordered, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had made difficult decisions in the depths of space. "Priority 1 emergency protocols. Tell them we've discovered a galaxy-level extinction event, and we need every available resource mobilized. Then set course for the edge of the phenomenon. If something is controlling this, we need to understand what we're fighting." As the crew sprang into action around her, Sarah stared out at the vast expanse of space visible through the bridge's viewport. Somewhere out there, an intelligence capable of unmaking reality itself was systematically erasing everything she had ever known or loved. But humanity had never backed down from a fight, no matter how impossible the odds seemed. The universe needed a savior, and whether they were ready or not, humanity would have to answer that call. The abandoned research station on Proxima Centauri b had been humanity's most ambitious scientific outpost until 3 days ago. Now it served as the perfect stage for the most elaborate deception in human history. Dr. James Morrison watched through reinforced windows as automated systems continued their programmed routines, maintaining the illusion of normal operations while the station's actual population had been evacuated to hidden bunkers deep beneath the planet's surface. Phase 1 of Operation Mirage is active, Admiral Blake announced through secured channels to command centers across human space. All major installations are now broadcasting false technological signatures. If our enemy is studying us, they're about to get very confused about our actual capabilities. The deception was breathtakingly complex. Every human world was simultaneously broadcasting conflicting information about their defensive capabilities, technological development, and population levels. Ancient chemical rockets appeared to be humanity's primary propulsion system on some worlds, while others displayed impossible faster-than-light technologies that existed only in theoretical models. The goal was to create so much contradictory data that the enemy's analysis would be delayed indefinitely. Meanwhile, in the depths of the Titan research complex, humanity's actual response was taking shape. Dr. Elizabeth Reeves had assembled the greatest collection of scientific minds in human history, working around the clock to decode the enemy's technology. The laboratory complex stretched for kilometers beneath Titan's frozen surface, protected by layers of ice and rock from any external observation. "We've made a breakthrough," Dr. Reeves announced to the assembled team of physicists, engineers, and theoretical mathematicians. The exhaustion was evident in everyone's faces, but their eyes blazed with desperate determination. The enemy structures aren't just operating in higher dimensions, they're using dimensional folding to compress massive amounts of matter into pocket universes before harvesting the energy. Professor Chen Wei, a specialist in exotic matter physics, looked up from his calculations with excitement. "That explains the energy signatures we've been detecting. They're not destroying matter. They're compressing it into alternate dimensional spaces for processing. The actual harvesting takes place outside our normal space-time continuum." The implications were staggering. If the enemy was operating partially outside normal space-time, conventional weapons would indeed be useless. But it also suggested potential vulnerabilities that human ingenuity might be able to exploit. "What if we could disrupt their dimensional folding process?" asked Dr. Sarah Kim, a quantum mechanics expert from the Mars Institute. "Force them to operate entirely within normal space where our weapons might actually affect them?" Dr. Reeves pulled up holographic models of the enemy harvesting structures, overlaying theoretical dimensional maps that hurt to look at directly. The challenge is that we need to generate dimensional interference patterns on a massive scale. We're talking about energy requirements that exceed the total output of our sun. Then we use our sun, said a quiet voice from the back of the laboratory. Everyone turned to see Dr. Miguel Santos, a previously unknown researcher from the outer colony stations. His proposal was audacious beyond belief, converting Sol itself into a massive dimensional resonance generator. Admiral Blake's voice crackled through the communication system from Earth Command. Dr. Santos, please elaborate on this proposal. And quickly. Our long-range sensors are detecting movement from the enemy harvesting fleet. They appear to be accelerating their timeline. Dr. Santos stepped forward, his hands trembling slightly as he activated the holographic displays. We construct a network of resonance amplifiers in close solar orbit. By using the sun's natural fusion processes and magnetic field fluctuations, we can generate dimensional interference waves that propagate faster than light. The energy requirements are enormous, but the sun provides a virtually unlimited power source. The room fell silent as the scientists absorbed the implications. They were talking about building structures that could function in close proximity to a star, withstanding temperatures and radiation levels that would vaporize any known material. The engineering challenges were beyond anything humanity had ever attempted. The construction time frame alone would take years, objected Dr. Kim. We have months at most before the enemy reaches our core systems. Not if we use the new molecular assembler technology from the Titan shipyards, countered Professor Wei. We could have automated construction systems building the resonance network while we finalized the dimensional interference calculations. Dr. Reeves felt a spark of hope igniting in her chest. The plan was insane, technically impossible, and would require every resource of human civilization to implement. In other words, it was exactly the kind of audacious gamble that humanity specialized in. Admiral Blake, we need immediate authorization to begin construction. And we need every physicist, engineer, and mathematician in human space working on the resonance calculations. You have whatever you need, Blake replied without hesitation. But I need realistic timeframes. How long do you need to build this dimensional interference network? Dr. Santos consulted his preliminary calculations, his mind racing through the logistics of the most complex construction project in human history. With full automation and every shipyard in the solar system contributing, we could have the basic network operational in 4 months. But Admiral, there's something else you need to know. The communication channel fell silent, waiting for Santos to continue. The dimensional interference effect won't just disrupt enemy operations. It will affect all higher dimensional technologies in the local region. That includes our own faster-than-light communication systems, our jump drives, even some of our more advanced sensors. We'll be cutting ourselves off from the rest of human space. Admiral Blake processed this information quickly. Earth's solar system would become isolated, dependent entirely on their own resources for the final confrontation with an enemy that had consumed entire galaxies. Doctor, if this works, does it have the potential to permanently damage the enemy's harvesting capabilities? More than damage them, Dr. Reeves interjected, excitement building in her voice as she reviewed Santos's calculations. If we can maintain the interference pattern at sufficient strength, we might be able to force a complete dimensional collapse of their harvesting structures. The energy feedback could destroy their entire fleet in this region. The scope of what they were attempting began to sink in. Humanity was going to gamble everything on an untested theoretical weapon that might save not just their own species, but every other civilization that the enemy might target in the future. They were volunteering to become the last stand for conscious life in their region of the galaxy. Begin construction immediately, Admiral Blake ordered. I'm authorizing the mobilization of every resource in the solar system. Every human colony, every research station, every available ship and manufacturing facility. We're betting our civilization on this plan. As the communication ended, the scientists scattered to their workstations, beginning the frantic calculations and preparations for humanity's most desperate gamble. In shipyards around Jupiter and Saturn, massive automated systems came online, beginning the construction of structures designed to function in the heart of a star. On Earth, evacuation procedures accelerated as the planet's population prepared for the possibility that their world might not survive the coming battle. Commander, Chen's voice reached them from the distant Prometheus, monitoring the enemy advance. Council, the harvesting fleet has definitely accelerated. They're moving faster than our previous projections suggested. Updated calculations put their arrival at the outer solar system in 3 months, not 6. Dr. Reeves felt her stomach drop. They had half the time they thought. To build a weapon that had never been tested using technologies that barely existed, against an enemy that had perfected cosmic warfare over millions of years. But as she looked around at the determined faces of her colleagues, she saw the same stubborn human refusal to accept defeat that had carried their species from caves to the stars. Then we build it in 3 months, she said quietly. Failure is not an option. Outside the laboratory windows, Titan's frozen landscape stretched toward a distant sun that might soon become humanity's last weapon. The universe had called for a savior, and humanity was preparing to answer, armed with nothing but ingenuity, determination, and an unshakable belief that even impossible odds could be overcome. The emergency session of the United Earth Council convened within hours of receiving the Prometheus transmission. President Elena Vasquez stood before a semicircle of holographic projections representing every major human colony and outpost across known space. The tension in the chamber was palpable as delegates from Mars, Europa, Titan, and dozens of other worlds materialized through quantum communication links. Ladies and gentlemen, President Vasquez began, her voice carrying across light years to reach the scattered remnants of humanity. We face the greatest threat in our species' history. What Commander Chen has discovered isn't just an attack on human civilization. It's an attack on existence itself. The massive display behind her showed real-time footage from the Prometheus sensors. Star systems that had burned for billions of years were simply ceasing to exist, leaving behind regions of space so empty that even background radiation couldn't penetrate them. The sight sent murmurs of disbelief through the assembled delegates. Admiral Harrison Blake, commander of Earth's Defense Forces, stepped forward with a grim expression. His decorated uniform bore the scars of previous conflicts with hostile alien species, but nothing in his military experience had prepared him for this. Our preliminary analysis suggests we have approximately 7 months before this phenomenon reaches Earth's solar system. Every major fleet in human space is being mobilized, but conventional weapons may prove useless against an enemy that can erase matter from existence. Dr. Elizabeth Reeves, humanity's leading expert on exotic physics, had been working around the clock since the first reports arrived. Her research team had been analyzing every scrap of data transmitted by the Prometheus, searching for any weakness or pattern they could exploit. The energy signatures are consistent with theoretical models of higher dimensional manipulation, she explained, her voice steady despite the exhaustion evident in her appearance. Whatever intelligence is behind this has mastered technologies that operate outside our 3-dimensional understanding of reality. The delegate from New Geneva Colony raised his hand, his image flickering slightly due to subspace interference. What about evacuation procedures? Can we move our populations to regions of space that haven't been affected? President Vasquez exchanged glances with Admiral Blake before responding. Every human world is implementing emergency evacuation protocols, but the scope of this threat makes traditional evacuation impossible. We're looking at potentially moving 50 billion people across interstellar distances while being pursued by an enemy that can travel faster than our best ships. The delegate from the Kepler Station mining facility spoke next, his voice tight with concern. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected similar phenomena in other galaxies. This isn't limited to our local region. Whatever is causing this has been active across multiple galactic clusters for unknown periods of time. Dr. Reeves nodded gravely. That's correct. We've identified what appear to be dead zones in nearby galaxies where this same process has already been completed. Entire spiral arms reduced to absolute nothingness. Based on the scale of destruction, this intelligence has been active for millions of years, systematically cleaning out one galaxy after another. The implications were staggering. Humanity was facing an enemy that had been perfecting the art of cosmic genocide for longer than their species had existed. Every strategy, every defensive measure, every technological advantage they might develop had likely been encountered and defeated countless times before. Yet there was something uniquely human about their response to impossible odds. Instead of despair, the delegates began proposing increasingly audacious plans. The representative from the Tau Ceti research stations suggested weaponizing their experimental black hole generators. The military commander from Alpha Centauri proposed using their entire fleet as a massive kinetic weapon. Even knowing they were outclassed by incomprehensible margins, humanity's instinct was to fight back. Admiral Blake called for order as discussions grew heated. We need to coordinate our response carefully. Commander Chen is leading an investigation team directly to the phenomenon's edge. They're our best hope for understanding what we're fighting and finding any potential weaknesses. The transmission from the Prometheus crackled to life, bringing Commander Chen's image into the council chamber. Behind her, the bridge crew worked frantically at their stations while she delivered her report. Council members, we've reached the boundary of the affected region. What we've found defies every assumption we made about our enemy. The display shifted to show the Prometheus sensor readings. At the edge of the void where stars should have been, massive structures hung in space like monuments to destruction. They were clearly artificial, constructed from materials that didn't register on any human sensors. The geometry hurt to look at directly, as if the structures existed in more dimensions than human perception could process. These constructs appear to be harvesting something from the destroyed matter, Commander Chen continued. Not just destroying it, but converting it into energy patterns that are being transmitted somewhere beyond our sensor range. We're not dealing with mindless destruction. This is systematic harvesting on a galactic scale. Dr. Reeves leaned forward, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. Commander, can you get closer readings on those structures? If they're harvesting energy, there might be vulnerabilities in their collection systems. Negative, Doctor. We've attempted several approach vectors, but the gravitational distortions around those constructs are beyond our navigation capabilities. However, we have detected something else. There are smaller structures, what appear to be ships or drones, operating in coordinated patterns around the harvesters. The tactical implications hit Admiral Blake immediately. You're looking at their military forces. The harvesters are protected by escort vessels. Commander Chen nodded grimly. That's our assessment as well, Admiral. But here's what's interesting. The escort ships are using energy patterns similar to some of our own experimental technologies. Not identical, but there are recognizable principles in their propulsion and defensive systems. A new voice cut through the transmission, Dr. Webb from the Prometheus Science Station. Council members, I believe we've discovered why this intelligence has been so successful for so long. They don't just destroy civilizations, they study them first. Those escort vessels are using technologies derived from previous victims, possibly hundreds or thousands of different alien species that have been consumed over millions of years. The council chamber fell silent as the full horror of their situation became clear. They weren't just fighting a superior alien intelligence. They were fighting the accumulated knowledge and technology of every civilization that had ever existed in the affected regions. Every defensive strategy, every weapon system, every breakthrough that might have saved them had already been integrated into their enemy's arsenal. But President Vasquez saw something else in the data that sparked a dangerous hope. Dr. Webb, if they study their victims before destroying them, that suggests they need time to analyze and integrate new technologies. How long would that process take for a civilization like ours? Based on the progression rates we've observed, possibly weeks or even months, they appear to be thorough in their analysis, cataloging every aspect of a civilization's technological development before absorption. Admiral Blake's eyes gleamed with the beginning of a plan. Then we have an opportunity. If they need time to study us, we can use that time against them. Every piece of false information we can feed them, every deception we can maintain buys us more time to find a real solution. The delegate from New Shanghai Station raised an objection. Admiral, you're talking about using our entire civilization as bait. The risks are enormous. The risks of doing nothing are greater, Blake replied firmly. If we can delay their analysis, confuse their data collection, we might buy enough time for our scientists to find a way to fight back. It's a long shot, but it's better than waiting for extinction. President Vasquez called for a formal vote. All those in favor of implementing deception protocols to delay enemy analysis. One by one, the holographic representatives raised their hands. Despite the fear, despite the impossible odds, humanity had chosen to fight back in the only way available to them, with cunning, determination, and the stubborn refusal to accept defeat that had carried their species through countless previous crises. As the council session ended and emergency preparations began across human space, Commander Chen continued her surveillance of the enemy structures. Somewhere in those impossible geometries lay the key to survival, and humanity would find it or die trying. The construction zones around Seoul had transformed into a hive of activity that dwarfed every previous human engineering project combined. Massive automated factories orbited at precise distances from the sun, their heat-resistant hulls glowing cherry red as they assembled components for the dimensional resonance network. The sight was both beautiful and terrifying. Humanity's entire industrial capacity focused on building a weapon that existed only in theoretical equations. Captain Maria Vasquez piloted her heavy construction vessel through the maze of assembly platforms, her cargo hold filled with exotic materials synthesized in the zero-gravity factories orbiting Jupiter. The heat from Sol was intense even at this distance, requiring constant adjustment of her ship's thermal management systems. Around her, thousands of other vessels performed the same dangerous dance, delivering components to automated assembly systems that worked without pause. Construction Team Alpha 7, you're drifting too close to the resonance array. Perimeter, came the voice of traffic control from the command station on Ceres. The coordination required for this project made managing the construction of the Great Wall of China look simple by comparison. Every vessel, every automated system, every piece of equipment had to be precisely coordinated to avoid catastrophic collisions in the sun's gravitational. While Dr. Miguel Santos floated in the zero-gravity observation deck of the primary construction platform, watching as the resonance amplifiers took shape. Each amplifier was a marvel of engineering that shouldn't have been possible. To build the structures designed to channel the sun's fusion energy through crystalline matrices that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. The math alone had required the development of entirely new branches of theoretical physics. How are the resonance calculations proceeding? Dr. Elizabeth Reeves asked through the communication link from Titan. She had been working 18-hour shifts for 2 months, coordinating the scientific aspects of the project while Santos supervised the actual construction. The primary amplifier network is 60% complete, Santos replied, exhaustion evident in his voice. But Elizabeth, we've run into a problem with the dimensional anchoring systems. The theoretical models assumed we could use conventional gravitational fields to stabilize the higher dimensional components, but the actual implementation is proving more complex. Dr. Reeves felt her heart sink. They were already operating on an impossibly tight timeline, with enemy scouts detected at the edge of the outer solar system just 2 weeks ago. Any delay could mean the difference between salvation and extinction for humanity. What kind of complexity are we talking about? The dimensional anchors keep shifting out of phase with normal spacetime. We need a stabilizing influence that operates consistently across multiple dimensional layers, something that can serve as an absolute reference point for the resonance network. From her command post on Earth, Admiral Blake's voice cut through the conversation. Doctors, I'm looking at reports that say we have less than 3 weeks before the enemy harvesting fleet reaches Jupiter's orbit. Whatever solution you need, we need it fast. Dr. Reeves stared at the holographic models floating before her, her mind racing through every possibility they had considered and discarded. The dimensional anchoring problem was fundamental. Without stable reference points, the resonance network would tear itself apart the moment they activated it. But what could serve as an absolute anchor point across multiple dimensions? The answer came to her with such clarity that she almost laughed at its simplicity. Miguel, what if we use organic neural patterns as dimensional anchors? Human consciousness operates across multiple quantum states simultaneously. It might provide the stability we need. The communication channel fell silent as the implications sank in. They were talking about using human beings as living components in a weapon designed to channel the power of a star. The volunteers would be connected directly to the resonance network through experimental neural interfaces, their consciousness serving as dimensional anchor points for energies that could vaporize planets. Dr. Reeves, Admiral Blake's voice was carefully controlled. Are you suggesting we use human volunteers as integral components of the weapon system? It's the only solution that fits our timeline and technological constraints, Reeves replied. The neural interface technology exists. It's been used in our most advanced AI research projects. We would need volunteers who understand that they're essentially becoming part of the dimensional resonance network. Dr. Santos felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold of space. Elizabeth, the energy levels involved could be fatal. We're talking about channeling dimensional forces directly through human consciousness. The neural feedback alone could cause permanent brain damage or death. I know, she replied quietly. But without dimensional anchors, the entire project fails and humanity dies anyway. At least this gives us a chance. The request for volunteers went out across all human colonies within hours. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Scientists, military personnel, civilians from every walk of life volunteered to become part of humanity's last weapon. They understood the risks, understood that they might not survive the activation of the resonance network, but they also understood that without their sacrifice, no human would survive at all. Commander Sarah Chen was among the first to volunteer, transmitting her request from the Prometheus as she continued to monitor enemy movements. "I've spent my career exploring the unknown," she said in her recorded message. "If humanity needs me to become part of our defense system, then that's where I belong." Dr. James Morrison, the physicist who had helped design the original deception protocols, volunteered next. "I've spent my life studying the relationship between consciousness and quantum mechanics. If my mind can serve as an anchor point for humanity's survival, then that's how I want to be remembered." Within days, they had more volunteers than the system could accommodate. The selection process was heartbreaking, choosing which brave souls would be connected to the dimensional resonance network while others had to wait as backup. The chosen volunteers underwent intensive training on the neural interface systems, learning to maintain consciousness coherence under extreme quantum stress. The neural interface chambers were installed at key points throughout the resonance network, each one containing sophisticated life support systems designed to keep the human anchors alive during the weapon's activation. The volunteers would be suspended in specially designed pods, their minds directly linked to the dimensional field generators through quantum neural bridges. Final systems check in 12 hours, Admiral Blake announced as enemy long-range sensors detected the approaching harvesting fleet. The massive alien constructs were moving faster than previous projections had suggested, their impossible geometries creating gravitational distortions that were visible even from Earth's orbit. Dr. Reeves made one final inspection of the neural interface systems, visiting each volunteer personally to ensure they understood the magnitude of what they were attempting. The conversations were brief but emotional. These people were volunteering to become living components of a weapon that might kill them, all for the chance to save their species. "Doctor," said Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez from her interface chamber, "will we be aware of what's happening during the activation sequence?" "We don't know," Reeves admitted honestly. "The neural feedback might cause temporary unconsciousness, or you might experience sensations unlike anything humans have ever encountered. You'll be connected to dimensional forces that operate outside normal space-time." Rodriguez smiled despite the tubes and cables attached to her body. "Then we'll be the first humans to experience 11-dimensional consciousness. That's worth the risk." As the final preparations proceeded, humanity held its breath. Children were evacuated to the deepest bunkers on Earth and Mars, while the few remaining military vessels took defensive positions around the outer planets. The dimensional resonance network represented their only hope against an enemy that had consumed entire galaxies. But it was untested technology operated by volunteers who might not survive its activation. The enemy fleet crossed Neptune's orbit right on schedule, their harvesting structures beginning the familiar process of dimensional folding that preceded complete matter absorption. But this time they would find their prey wasn't defenseless. This time they faced a species crazy enough to turn their sun into a weapon and use their own consciousness as ammunition. "All stations report ready," came the final announcement from Earth Command. "Dimensional resonance network is prepared for activation. Human volunteers are in position and ready to serve as dimensional anchors." Dr. Santos took a deep breath as he placed his hand on the activation controls. Humanity's survival now depended on theoretical physics, experimental technology, and the willingness of brave volunteers to risk everything for their species. It was, he realized, the most human plan possible. "For Earth," he whispered, and began the activation sequence. The activation of the dimensional resonance network began with a sound that no human ear should have been able to perceive. It was a deep, thrumming vibration that seemed to come from the fabric of space itself, growing stronger as the sun's fusion energy was channeled through the crystalline amplifiers suspended in close solar orbit. Every human in the solar system felt it in their bones, a resonance that touched something fundamental in their consciousness. Dr. Miguel Santos watched the energy readings spike beyond every theoretical prediction as the network came online. The massive amplifiers surrounding Sol began to glow with impossible colors that existed only in higher dimensions, their crystalline structures refracting energy patterns through 11 layers of space-time simultaneously. "Neural anchors are holding stable," he reported, his voice tight with concentration as he monitored the volunteers connected to the dimensional field generators. In her interface chamber, Commander Sarah Chen experienced sensations beyond human description. Her consciousness expanded across multiple dimensions simultaneously, allowing her to perceive the enemy, harvesting fleet in ways that transcended normal vision. She could see the massive alien constructs not just as physical objects, but as complex patterns of dimensional manipulation that folded space around themselves like protective cocoons. "I can see them," she whispered through the neural interface, her voice reaching the command center through quantum entanglement communication. "They're not just ships, they're living dimensional gates. The structures we've been seeing are just the three-dimensional projections of something much larger." Dr. Elizabeth Reeves felt her excitement spike as the neural reports came in from all the volunteer anchors. Each human consciousness connected to the network was providing unique perspectives on the enemy fleet, revealing details that no conventional sensor could detect. "What else can you see, Commander? How do they operate?" Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez's voice joined the conversation from her interface chamber, her consciousness now existing partially outside normal space-time. "The harvesting process, and they're not destroying matter at all. They're converting it into pure information patterns and transmitting it somewhere else, somewhere outside our galaxy entirely." The implications hit the command center like a physical blow. The enemy wasn't just consuming civilizations for energy. They were collecting the information that comprised entire cultures, entire worlds, and sending it to some distant location. Every civilization they had destroyed still existed somewhere, compressed into data patterns and stored by an intelligence beyond comprehension. "Focus on the dimensional vulnerabilities," Admiral Blake ordered from Earth Command. "We need to know how to disrupt their harvesting process before they reach Earth's orbit." Dr. James Morrison's consciousness touched the deepest layers of the dimensional network, his mind reaching out to probe the enemy's defensive systems. What he found there made him gasp in shock. "Admiral, they're trying to hack the network. The enemy is attempting to infiltrate our dimensional resonance system." Through the neural interfaces, alarms began blaring across the command center as enemy intrusion attempts registered on every monitoring system. The alien intelligence was incredibly advanced, probing for weaknesses in humanity's desperate weapon with computational power that exceeded every human computer combined. But they had underestimated the chaotic creativity of human consciousness. "All neural anchors, implement randomization protocols," Dr. Reeves ordered. "Don't let them establish predictable patterns in your thought processes. Think chaotically, creatively, in ways that their logic systems can't predict or counter." The human volunteers responded with typical human unpredictability. Commander Chen began reciting ancient poetry in 17 different languages while solving complex mathematical equations. Rodriguez mentally composed a symphony while simultaneously running tactical simulations of impossible battle scenarios. Morrison started inventing entirely new branches of theoretical physics while humming childhood lullabies. The enemy intrusion attempts faltered as human consciousness proved impossible to categorize or predict. Millions of years of experience with logical, organized alien minds had not prepared them for the beautiful chaos of human thought patterns. Their computational systems struggled to process the random creativity that flowed through the neural interfaces. "They're backing off," reported Dr. Santos as enemy probe attempts decreased. "Human consciousness is too chaotic for their analysis systems to process effectively. They can't establish stable intrusion pathways." But the respite was temporary. Long-range sensors detected the enemy fleet changing formation, their massive harvesting structures beginning to glow with ominous energy patterns. They were preparing to accelerate their timeline, abandoning their usual methodical approach in favor of immediate, overwhelming force. "They're charging their primary harvesting systems," Commander Chen reported from the neural interface, her expanded consciousness able to perceive energy buildups across multiple dimensions. "They're going to attempt to consume the entire inner solar system simultaneously, before we can complete our dimensional interference pattern." The race was on. Humanity's resonance network was still building toward full power, requiring precise calibration of the solar fusion channeling systems. The enemy fleet was preparing to unleash energies that could fold entire planets out of existence. Everything would depend on which side completed their preparations first. Increase power flow to all amplifiers, Admiral Blake ordered. I don't care if it burns out half the network. We need maximum dimensional interference now. The resonance amplifiers around Sol began to overload as energy flow increased beyond design specifications. Several of the outer ring amplifiers exploded in brilliant flashes of multi-dimensional light, their crystalline structures unable to handle the massive power surge. But the remaining amplifiers held, their energy output approaching the threshold needed for galaxy-wide dimensional interference. Network is at 70% of required power levels, Dr. Santos reported as more amplifiers reached critical stress points. We need another 30% increase to achieve full dimensional cascade disruption. Dr. Reeves made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Reroute auxiliary power from the neural interface life support systems. Channel everything into the amplifier network. The silence that followed was deafening. She was asking the volunteers to sacrifice their life support systems, essentially sentencing them to death, in order to achieve the power levels needed to save humanity. It was the kind of impossible choice that only desperate circumstances could justify. Do it, came Commander Chen's voice through the neural interface, steady and calm despite the fact that she was volunteering for certain death. All neural anchors concur. Reroute the power. One by one, the other volunteers confirmed the decision. They understood that their sacrifice might be the difference between humanity's survival and extinction. The life support systems in the neural interface chambers began shutting down as their power was redirected to the dimensional resonance amplifiers. The network's power output spiked dramatically as the redirected energy flowed through the crystalline matrices. The dimensional interference pattern strengthened, beginning to affect space-time structure across the entire solar system. Reality itself seemed to shimmer as higher dimensional forces clashed with the enemy's harvesting technology. Power levels at 95%, Santos reported, his voice cracking with emotion as he watched the vital signs of the volunteer neural anchors begin to fade. We're approaching the threshold for dimensional cascade disruption. The enemy fleet detected the building interference pattern and responded with desperate haste. Their harvesting structures began the folding sequence that would compress Earth, Mars, and every human world into pocket dimensions for processing. The process was faster than their usual methodical approach, but also less stable and more vulnerable to disruption. Now or never, Admiral Blake announced to the entire solar system. All remaining power to the resonance network. Complete dimensional cascade disruption in 3, 2, 1. The sun itself seemed to pulse as the final surge of energy flowed through the dimensional amplifiers. Space-time shuddered, reality bent, and the resonance network achieved the power levels needed to force a complete dimensional collapse of the enemy's harvesting technology. What happened next would determine whether humanity had saved the universe or destroyed themselves in the attempt. Through the neural interface, the dying volunteers experienced one final moment of expanded consciousness as human ingenuity prepared to clash with cosmic forces that had consumed entire galaxies. They had given everything for their species, and now they would learn if their sacrifice had been enough. The activation of the dimensional resonance network began with a sound that no human ear should have been able to perceive. It was a deep thrumming vibration that seemed to come from the fabric of space itself, growing stronger as the sun's fusion energy was channeled through the crystalline amplifiers suspended in close solar orbit. Every human in the solar system felt it in their bones, a resonance that touched something fundamental in their consciousness. Dr. Miguel Santos watched the energy readings spike beyond every theoretical prediction as the network came online. The massive amplifiers surrounding Sol began to glow with impossible colors that existed only in higher dimensions, their crystalline structures refracting energy patterns through 11 layers of space-time simultaneously. Neural anchors are holding stable, he reported, his voice tight with concentration as he monitored the volunteers connected to the dimensional field generators. In her interface chamber, Commander Sarah Chen experienced sensations beyond human description. Her consciousness expanded across multiple dimensions simultaneously, allowing her to perceive the enemy harvesting fleet in ways that transcended normal vision. She could see the massive alien constructs not just as physical objects, but as complex patterns of dimensional manipulation that folded space around themselves like protective cocoons. "I can see them," she whispered through the neural interface, her voice reaching the command center through quantum entanglement communication. "They're not just ships, they're living dimensional gates. The structures we've been seeing are just the three-dimensional projections of something much larger." Dr. Elizabeth Reeves felt her excitement spike as the neural reports came in from all the volunteer anchors. Each human consciousness connected to the network was providing unique perspectives on the enemy fleet, revealing details that no conventional sensor could detect. "What else can you see, Commander? How do they operate?" Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez's voice joined the conversation from her interface chamber, her consciousness now existing partially outside normal space-time. "The harvesting process, they're not destroying matter at all. They're converting it into pure information patterns and transmitting it somewhere else, somewhere outside our galaxy entirely." The implications hit the command center like a physical blow. The enemy wasn't just consuming civilizations for energy. They were collecting the information that comprised entire cultures, entire worlds, and sending it to some distant location. Every civilization they had destroyed still existed somewhere, compressed into data patterns and stored by an intelligence beyond comprehension. "Focus on the dimensional vulnerabilities," Admiral Blake ordered from Earth Command. "We need to know how to disrupt their harvesting process before they reach Earth's orbit." Dr. James Morrison's consciousness touched the deepest layers of the dimensional network, his mind reaching out to probe the enemy's defensive systems. What he found there made him gasp in shock. "Admiral, they're trying to hack the network. The enemy is attempting to infiltrate our dimensional resonance system through the neural interfaces." Alarms began blaring across the command center as enemy intrusion attempts registered on every monitoring system. The alien intelligence was incredibly advanced, probing for weaknesses in humanity's desperate weapon with computational power that exceeded every human computer combined. But they had underestimated the chaotic creativity of human consciousness. "All neural anchors, implement randomization protocols," Dr. Reeves ordered. "Don't let them establish predictable patterns in your thought processes. Think chaotically, creatively in ways that their logic systems can't predict or counter." The human volunteers responded with typical human unpredictability. Commander Chen began reciting ancient poetry in 17 different languages while solving complex mathematical equations. Rodriguez mentally composed a symphony while simultaneously running tactical simulations of impossible battle scenarios. Morrison started inventing entirely new branches of theoretical physics while humming childhood lullabies. The enemy intrusion attempts faltered as human consciousness proved impossible to categorize or predict. Millions of years of experience with logical, organized alien minds had not prepared them for the beautiful chaos of human thought patterns. Their computational systems struggled to process the random creativity that flowed through the neural interfaces. "They're backing off," reported Dr. Santos as enemy probe attempts decreased. "Human consciousness is too chaotic for their analysis systems to process effectively. They can't establish stable intrusion pathways." But the respite was temporary. Long-range sensors detected the enemy fleet changing formation, their massive harvesting structures beginning to glow with ominous energy patterns. They were preparing to accelerate their timeline, abandoning their usual methodical approach in favor of immediate, overwhelming force. "They're charging their primary harvesting systems," Commander Chen reported from the neural interface, her expanded consciousness able to perceive energy buildups across multiple dimensions. "They're going to attempt to consume the entire inner solar system simultaneously, before we can complete our dimensional interference pattern." The race was on. Humanity's resonance network was still building toward full power, requiring precise calibration of the solar fusion channeling systems. The enemy fleet was preparing to unleash energies that could fold entire planets out of existence. Everything would depend on which side completed their preparations first. "Increase power flow to all amplifiers," Admiral Blake ordered. "I don't care if it burns out half the network. We need maximum dimensional interference now." The resonance amplifiers around Sol began to overload as energy flow increased beyond design specifications. Several of the outer ring amplifiers exploded in brilliant flashes of multidimensional light, their crystalline structures unable to handle the massive power surge. But the remaining amplifiers held, their energy output approaching the threshold needed for galaxy-wide dimensional interference. Network is at 70% of required power levels. Dr. Santos reported as more amplifiers reached critical stress points. We need another 30% increase to achieve full dimensional cascade disruption. Dr. Reeves made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Reroute auxiliary power from the neural interface life support systems. Channel everything into the amplifier network. The silence that followed was deafening. She was asking the volunteers to sacrifice their life support systems, essentially sentencing them to death, in order to achieve the power levels needed to save humanity. It was the kind of impossible choice that only desperate circumstances could justify. "Do it," came Commander Chen's voice through the neural interface, steady and calm despite the fact that she was volunteering for certain death. All neural anchors concur. Reroute the power. One by one, the other volunteers confirmed the decision. They understood that their sacrifice might be the difference between humanity's survival and extinction. The life support systems in the neural interface chambers began shutting down as their power was redirected to the dimensional resonance amplifiers. The network's power output spiked dramatically as the redirected energy flowed through the crystalline matrices. The dimensional interference pattern strengthened, beginning to affect space-time structure across the entire solar system. Reality itself seemed to shimmer as higher dimensional forces clashed with the enemy's harvesting technology. "Power levels at 95%, Santos reported, his voice cracking with emotion as he watched the vital signs of the volunteer neural anchors begin to fade. "We're approaching the threshold for dimensional cascade disruption." The enemy fleet detected the building interference pattern and responded with desperate haste. Their harvesting structures began the folding sequence that would compress Earth, Mars, and every human world into pocket dimensions for processing. The process was faster than their usual methodical approach, but also less stable and more vulnerable to disruption. "Now or never," Admiral Blake announced to the entire solar system. "All remaining power to the resonance network. Complete dimensional cascade disruption in 3, 2, 1. The sun itself seemed to pulse as the final surge of energy flowed through the dimensional amplifiers. Space-time shuddered, reality bent, and the resonance network achieved the power levels needed to force a complete dimensional collapse of the enemy's harvesting technology. What happened next would determine whether humanity had saved the universe or destroyed themselves in the attempt. Through the neural interface, the dying volunteers experienced one final moment of expanded consciousness, as human ingenuity prepared to clash with cosmic forces that had consumed entire galaxies. They had given everything for their species, and now they would learn if their sacrifice had been enough. The moment billions of human minds connected to the dimensional resonance network, reality itself seemed to take a breath. Dr. Elizabeth Reeves felt the change instantly. The chaotic interference pattern that had been weakening suddenly strengthened beyond all theoretical predictions as the combined consciousness of humanity poured into the system. From her fading neural interface, the dying Commander Sarah Chen experienced the joining of human minds as a symphony of impossible beauty. Every thought, every dream, every creative impulse from billions of people flowed through the dimensional network, creating patterns so complex and unpredictable that the enemy's computational systems couldn't process them. "Network stability is holding," Dr. Miguel Santos reported with amazement. "The distributed consciousness load is actually working. The enemy dimensional folding systems are completely disrupted. They can't establish stable higher dimensional anchors while our interference pattern is active." But the true power of humanity's response became clear when something unprecedented happened. Instead of simply maintaining the interference pattern, the combined human consciousness began to actively reshape it, turning the defensive network into something far more powerful. Billions of minds working together unconsciously started to reverse engineer the enemy's dimensional technology through pure intuitive understanding. "Elizabeth," came Dr. Sarah Kim's voice from Mars, her mind now part of the vast neural network. "We're not just disrupting their technology anymore. We're learning how it works. The collective human consciousness is decoding their dimensional manipulation principles in real time." Admiral Blake watched in awe as tactical displays showed the impossible happening. The enemy harvesting ships, trapped in normal space by the interference pattern, were beginning to lose structural cohesion. But instead of simple destruction, something far more remarkable was occurring. The trapped consciousnesses within the ships were being liberated without destroying their physical forms. The ships are being converted, reported the sensor operators from the remaining observation posts. The enemy harvesting technology is being repurposed by the dimensional network. Those structures are becoming rescue vessels, extracting the imprisoned minds without harming them. Through the distributed consciousness network, humanity was performing a feat of engineering that transcended any previous accomplishment in galactic history. Billions of minds working in perfect unconscious coordination were rewriting the fundamental operating principles of the enemy's technology, turning their instruments of cosmic genocide into tools of liberation. The first freed consciousness to communicate directly with humanity was ancient beyond measure, a being that had been trapped within the harvesting matrices for over 3 million years. Its gratitude flowed through the network like warm light, carrying with it fragments of knowledge from civilizations that had died before Earth's sun was born. "We remember," the ancient voice whispered, through dimensions that human language couldn't properly describe. "We remember our worlds, our people, our dreams that were cut short. Through your network, we can finally share what was lost, preserve what was destroyed." More voices joined the growing chorus as the dimensional network freed consciousness after consciousness from their technological prisons. Beings from thousands of different species, representing millions of years of galactic history, began adding their knowledge and experiences to humanity's distributed neural network. The result was an explosion of understanding that advanced human science by millennia in a matter of minutes. We're receiving technical specifications for faster-than-light travel that doesn't require dimensional folding, Dr. Reeves announced in wonder as alien knowledge flowed through her consciousness. Advanced medical technologies that could extend human lifespan by centuries. Agricultural techniques that could transform barren worlds into gardens. The freed civilizations are sharing everything they know. But the greatest gift came when the network accessed the memories of a species that had successfully resisted the enemy fleet millions of years ago. The hegemony of Keth had been the only civilization to develop effective countermeasures against the harvesting technology, though they had ultimately been overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Their defensive strategies, preserved in the consciousness of their last survivors, now flowed into humanity's collective understanding. "They found the weakness," Commander Chen reported, her consciousness now somehow stabilized by the distributed network effect. "The enemy's central control intelligence. It's not just directing the fleet. It's personally present in the largest harvesting construct. All their dimensional technology depends on a single controlling consciousness that's been guiding this campaign for millions of years." The tactical implications were staggering. Instead of fighting thousands of individual ships, humanity needed to target one central intelligence that coordinated the entire enemy fleet. But that intelligence was protected by the most heavily shielded construct in the fleet, a massive vessel that existed primarily in higher dimensions and was virtually impregnable to conventional attack. The Keth found a way to force the central intelligence into normal space, the ancient voices explained, through the network. But it requires a conscious mind willing to engage it directly in dimensional combat. One individual consciousness backed by the combined will of an entire species can create a resonance cascade that forces the enemy intelligence to manifest physically. Admiral Blake understood immediately. "You're asking for a volunteer to face this enemy intelligence directly, using their consciousness as a weapon." "Not just any consciousness," the freed voices clarified. "It requires someone already connected to the dimensional network, someone who understands how the enemy technology operates, someone who has experienced multidimensional existence and survived." Every eye in the command center turned to Commander Chen. She was the only human who had maintained stable consciousness while connected to the full dimensional network, the only person who had experienced existence across multiple dimensions and retained her sanity. She was also dying from neural interface overload, her brain slowly shutting down from the massive feedback she had endured. "I'll do it," Chen said quietly, her voice carrying across the quantum communication network to every human mind in the solar system. "I'm dying anyway, and if my consciousness can force this enemy intelligence into vulnerability, then that's how I want to go out." Dr. Reeves felt tears streaming down her face as she realized what Chen was volunteering for. Sarah, you're talking about direct consciousness-to-consciousness combat, with an intelligence that has consumed entire galaxies. The mental strain could destroy your mind completely. Then I'll die fighting, Chen replied with typical human stubbornness. But I won't die helplessly. Connect me to the targeting system. Let's end this. The final phase of the battle began as Commander Chen's consciousness, amplified by the combined will of billions of human minds, reached out across dimensional space to confront the enemy's central intelligence directly. The contact, when it came, was like touching the edge of an infinite abyss filled with the screams of consumed civilizations. The enemy intelligence was ancient, powerful, and utterly without mercy. It had been directing cosmic genocide for longer than most stars had existed, consuming the creativity and consciousness of countless species to feed its own incomprehensible purposes. But it had never faced anything like human consciousness before, where other species had met the enemy with logic, organization, and advanced technology. Humanity brought chaos, creativity, and stubborn refusal to accept defeat. Chen's consciousness, backed by billions of human minds, attacked the enemy intelligence with weapons it couldn't understand. Hope in the face of impossible odds, laughter in the midst of tragedy, love that transcended individual survival. The dimensional battle raged across layers of reality that human senses couldn't perceive. But its effects were visible throughout the solar system. Space itself seemed to shimmer, as two incompatible forms of consciousness clashed with forces that threatened to tear holes in the fabric of existence. The central intelligence is being forced into normal space. Dr. Santos reported as massive gravitational distortions appeared around the enemy flagship. Whatever Chen is doing, it's working. The controlling consciousness is losing its higher dimensional anchors. The enemy's massive flagship, previously existing primarily in folded space, began to manifest fully in normal three-dimensional reality. As it did, its defenses became vulnerable to conventional attack for the first time in millions of years. The ship was enormous beyond human comprehension, but it was finally solid, finally targetable. All remaining vessels concentrate fire on the enemy flagship, Admiral Blake ordered. This is our chance to end their reign of terror permanently. The few surviving human ships unleashed everything they had at the materializing enemy vessel. Fusion warheads, kinetic penetrators, experimental particle beams. Every weapon in humanity's arsenal focused on the ship that contained the consciousness responsible for galactic genocide. But it was Commander Chen who struck the killing blow. As her consciousness grappled with the enemy intelligence in dimensional space, she discovered the secret that had allowed this ancient being to consume entire galaxies. It fed,